Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by Partners for Sustainability in collaboration with Climate Services. Allow me a few words to introduce you, Partners for Sustainability. Our company is focusing on analytics and communication on sustainable investing, particularly in mutual funds. We have developed a web application that presents the analysis and assessment and a lot of information on more than 1,000 mutual funds. And among them, you may find a lot of ones that relate to climate change. So do not hesitate to check this application. You can go to our website when you see the address on the screen, and then choose on the menu Fund Finder and Access to Fund Finder. It's a free access, so you can check it by yourself. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to write us. But that's it. Now I will hand over to Werner Halter, who is the founder and CEO of Climate Services, and he will present you the basics of CO2 management and accounting. Werner.
Hello, thank you, Philip, for this introduction. Welcome also from my side to this webinar. The objective today is, we have actually two objectives. One is to tell you something about the importance of CO2 and CO2 management to companies, the impact this may have on daily activities and the way you can integrate this in daily decision-making processes, for instance, and then show you a few things about a tool that we've developed to facilitate this management and to be able to integrate this into your own activities. So let me move to the first slide. You used this type of picture that what most people have in mind when we talk about climate change. This is actually not what we are going to talk about today in detail, but it is obviously the starting point of all the things that we are interested in. What we are going to talk about and what is more pertinent for companies are the targets that are set in Switzerland but also internationally on CO2 reduction. Minus 20% by 2020, minus 30% by 2030, and going to carbon neutral in 2050. This obviously has brought up quite a few constraints and risks for companies that do not move into this direction, but also provides advantages and opportunities for those who intend to move from a high carbon to a low carbon track. Just mention a few things like de-investment, substitution of fossil fuels, which is going to change completely your supply chain, etc., etc. But also subsidies you can benefit from, innovation that is ongoing and that may support you in your daily activities. So a lot of things going on and need to be integrated into your daily business if you want to stay competitive over the next few years. Let me just take one example to illustrate this, and that is an example of two energy producing companies in the US. The first one, Duke Energy, has a net benefit of $1.9 billion in 2014 and produced 125 million tons of CO2 to generate the energy that they've sold to their clients. The other company is in California, Sempra Energy. They are submitted to a cap and trade system in terms of carbon. Roughly the same benefit in 2014 of $1.2 billion, but produced only 7 million tons of CO2 to produce the energy. So what that means is that if the US were to decide on a carbon tax of about $10 per ton, which is really not that much, we're talking much more here in Switzerland, for instance, that would cut the benefit of Duke Energy by 60%. In terms of Sempra Energy, it would only represent 6%. So immediately to see the importance that it may have to integrate this in your decision-making process, in the way you develop your company, the orientation you want to give it, etc., etc., Very small taxes can have a tremendous impact on some of these companies, but they would also obviously have impacts on all of your own activities. You all pay taxes, and we need to integrate this in our calculations for returns on investments, etc., etc. The different things that we have to change, some of them we actually know. When you talk about energy supply, we know how to use or produce renewable energies. It's just that the infrastructure is not sufficient yet to produce enough renewable energies. For the mobility, it's the same thing. We have electric mobility. We know how to do this, but we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have enough vehicles today to be able to switch on renewable energies. Same thing for construction. We know how to build houses, even that can produce energy. I don't even use any energy anymore. So that's not too much of a problem. It's just a matter of, well, get it done. The transport issue is a bit different. Currently, we don't have any solutions for air transport. We can add a little bit of biofuel, but that's not going to help very much. Shipping is obviously also a problem. The picture on the right shows you a sail that is dragging a ship, container ship, and that reduces by 15–20% the amount of energy that you need. But still, you haven't solved the problem, and then you have obviously all the industrial processes that you need to add, and some of the companies themselves, the major oil-producing companies, but also cement industry, where you wonder what is going to happen to this. So we're talking about major changes that will come up and that we have to react to in a very short period of time to be able to reach all these goals. So for companies, what does that actually mean? Constraints, risks, obviously, and advantages and opportunities. Switzerland has set a few targets, minus 20% by 2020, minus 30% by 2030, etc., in terms of CO2 emissions. And that is generating constraints and risks. The constraints are obviously expectation from the clients, from the customers, rules and regulations that come up, taxes that we need to pay, but also de-investment from CO2. You know, investment funds are putting out from heavy carbon focused investments. Philip just told you about what they are all specialized about. And then substitution of fossil fuels and transportation will become more difficult, etc. So these are constraints that we have to cope with. It generates obviously a lot of risks, loss of markets, taxes, product values, etc., etc. And we need to adapt to this. But there are also advantages. I mean, moving from the high carbon to the low carbon side will generate quite a few advantages for companies that engage the process very quickly, like subsidies, for instance, that you can get today that we probably won't get any more than 50 years from now. But we're also talking about innovations, new products, new markets, etc. You get financial support, but you get a lot of other opportunities and help to actually change the way you're producing goods, the way you're producing services, etc., in order to go from the high to the low carbon side. And that is really what one of the messages I would like you to take along. Switching now is certainly much more interesting than waiting and switching in 10 to 15 years. Let me just show you one example to illustrate this. So we have two energy producing companies in the US. One has a benefit of $1.9 billion and the other one of 1.2, so similar size. One is in California and the other one not. Duke Energy, to produce the energy that they are selling to their clients, emits 125 million tons of CO2 per year. Sempra Energy, who's under a cap-and-trade system in California, emits only 7 million tons of CO2. And talking about taxes, I talked about taxes before. If we add a $10 tax on per ton of CO2 onto this, we immediately see that Duke Energy will lose 60% of their benefits just through this tax. Sempra Energy will not be that much hit by this. They will lose only 6% of the benefits. So it is important for these companies, and it's important for a lot of us to react soon enough not to be confronted with this type of problematic issue. So what should we do? How can we prevent the negative impact, and how can we identify opportunities? Well, that's what we call CO2 management in companies. Fairly trivial, there's nothing complicated about this. Basically measure, reduce, and then value what you're doing. Measure and analyze is get your footprint on, your carbon footprint, analyze your footprint, and depending on where your emissions are, set some targets, find out how you can reduce this. There are networks, there are a lot of helps to do this. And then eventually value your action in the communication. Use labels, reports, to communicate what you're doing is currently still a very important aspect of the entire process. So the first point is evaluate your exposure. It's what we call setting the boundaries of your system, which CO2 emissions are actually generated by your activities as a company. And that's obviously what you're doing in-house, but it's also upstream and downstream. Upstream, we're talking about the materials that you're buying, the transport of goods to your company, etc., which exposes you not directly to taxes, but obviously what you're buying or the services that you purchase may increase if they are CO2 emitting. Downstream, it's more looking at your waste, looking at your clients, will your products will still be competitive if you're subject to taxes, etc. So the important thing here is to grab the entire set of emissions that you're subject to, and then you go into a quantification, which is your carbon footprint. You just, based on your energy bills, based on your commuting, your traveling, etc., quantify your CO2 emissions, and that's what is going to give you your footprint. Shows you where you're subject to some heavy CO2 emissions, and it gives you also the monitor to control your reducing actions that you may take and see how effective they are. Here is one sort of analysis that we're doing. On the left-hand side, you have the average price that Swiss company pay today in terms of taxes on the CO2 emissions. So we're talking about something between 30, the dark blue bars are for taxes that you're paying today, different energy, in different sectors here. You see you pay up to 20, 30, 40 francs a ton already today in terms of taxes. The light blue bar represents what you would pay in 2020 if you don't reduce the CO2 emissions, because we know these taxes will increase. It's already set in the law, and they will further increase after 2020. So that's one of the risks that you're facing, and on the right-hand side, we just took the total tax divided by the turnover to show you that the different sectors are obviously affected differently. Important is also the variation that you have in the sector to see how competitive you still are against other industries. But you see that depending on the sector you're working in, you're more or less exposed, obviously, to this risk. Now, these are only taxes. This is not including any risk like image or any other risk related to your products or your suppliers. Once you've done this work of analysis, obviously implementing that is very much dependent on your activities and what you can optimize, talking about your renewable energy consumption, traveling, etc., etc. That's really yours to find the best way to reduce your impact and reduce your risk, but also then maybe propose new services, propose new products, and find out about new markets. Value your action is important, as I said before. You have labels, you can report on your carbon footprint, publish things. This is becoming more and more important also for some of your clients maybe. Big international organizations are more and more disclosing on their carbon footprint, and they're obviously also providing information about their suppliers. And if you're one of these suppliers, you may have been faced, or you will be faced soon, by some questions from your clients about what you're doing in terms of your CO2 reduction and how you manage this. As I said, the picture I want you to take away from this is not taxes and laws and constraints, but much more the opportunity that this may represent. You have here new products like carbon neutral printing, for instance, which can be proposed by some companies. You have new technologies that they're developing. Here you have some systems that grow algae to produce biofuels. New technologies like this bus in Geneva, who's an electric bus driving with a very small battery and a speed recharge at the bus stop, which basically replaces a tram, but without these electric wires at the top. And new financing mechanisms for special buildings, whatever. So use the opportunity, find out what's best for you, and that's certainly one of the ways that you can keep your competitivity or improve your competitivity in the next few years with this changing landscape. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation, the quick presentation. So reduce cost, reduce risk, and the CO2 management, I think that's the first thing that you need to do, and it's not that complicated. Getting a carbon footprint done is not a heavy thing, it's not a complicated issue. You just need to do it properly to conform to international standards. And then you have many ways, many opportunities to reduce your carbon exposure. So before we get to some of the questions, let me just show you quickly what this CO2 platform is like. It's a tool that we've made to facilitate basically the process for companies. So it's an online tool which allows you to do different things. Here I have a list of different tools. You will find some errors that I just mentioned before. Basically, we have one tool to get a footprint. We structure this, so we create here I've generated some fake service company. We generate a data collection form specially designed for your company, so we make sure that we are conform to these international standards when we make a carbon footprint. And then it's yours to fill out this form to enter all the data that is pertinent for your company. It's obviously structured in terms of your own structure. Go here to headquarters, for instance, you can start enter the information that is pertinent for this site, and select units that you need to enter, your fuel, the consumption. These are the data from previous years. You can add prices, comments, add files, whatever you need to make sure that you have the entire information here handy. And we're talking obviously about heating, electricity, traveling, transport of goods, commuting, paper, etc., etc. So everything that is pertinent to your company. So once you've done this, we obviously check numbers, and then we validate this, and then you have access to your footprint. If I go back to the same company as before, the result of the raw data that you've entered would be your carbon footprint. It's a table which is just generating now, giving you CO2 emissions and obviously the analysis of the different things. Here we have a large part due to commuting, part due to heating, trips, electricity, whatever. And that's really a starting point to start to understand where you have exposure to CO2 and where can you then actually start to do some effort to reduce this. In commuting, obviously it's more difficult. You need to travel, you need to change your rules within the company. Electricity may be easier just by green electricity. That's going to reduce your footprint already by probably here 7.5%. Okay, so that's for the analysis. Once you've done all of this, we've put online a set of information, databases, etc., to help you find the right solution for your reduction. These are best practices examples, projects that were described. You click on this and you have pages opening with some project descriptions. A info library where you can find a lot of published CO2 footprints, sustainability reports, references, norms, laws, etc., etc. So basic background information that you may need to figure out what's best for you to reduce your carbon footprint, and you have some news that we put online as well. The next thing I'd like to show you now is the sort of a network that we're putting together. It's a list of companies. It's going to show up just in a second. Hopefully, that counts. Depending on what your problem was, I take electricity, for instance. You can filter different domains. Efficiency, for instance, and you find lists of companies that are hopefully close to you in different sectors that can help you implement projects to reduce your CO2 emissions. They will just provide you with information, etc., etc. You click on this, you have more information on the company itself, and then it should help you to find the right way to take action. Finally, some subsidies that are existing. We have a whole list of subsidies depending on cantons, depending on maybe even the commune you're in, and that provide support to implement CO2 reduction projects, provided financial support, basically. And as I said, this type of help is available now, and it may not be available anymore in 5 or 10 years from now, when people all start to switch to a low carbon business. So that's it for this presentation. Let me just go back to some questions. I don't know if you have written down a few questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Bernard. Very, very interesting. We have a few questions from the attendees. I propose these ones. First question is if you would be able to talk a bit more about the new mechanisms financing this CO2 management and reducing of CO2 in companies. And the other one, which is a bit related, is how long do you believe that governments will continue to subsidize new energy? As we all know, it's heavily subsidized, solar panels and wind and so on. And do you think this will still go on? Great.
Sure. Different types of help that we can get this. It's very much dependent on the canton and where you are. But there are financing mechanisms that are developing now, like contracting models on energy supply. If you think about a company that wants to switch its energy supply, you can have funds that would actually finance this and develop a model where you're reducing your costs because you're reducing your energy consumption, and basically they finance the infrastructure and you're sharing the reduction that you're generating between the owner of the industry and the person who financed this. So these are new mechanisms that are coming up besides just regular subsidies. Now, within other ways to finance this, we have these carbon credits, which you may have heard about, which are used to finance projects to reduce CO2 emissions. They're mostly used in other countries. We cannot develop projects in Switzerland that generate carbon credits, but we have a similar in-house, let's say, mechanism to finance projects. And money actually then comes from the compensation that you need to make when you, or importing companies have to do, given by the law, the CO2 law that is now active till 2020. So they have to compensate part of CO2 emissions generated by the fossil fuels they're importing, and this money then goes into projects that you can develop, and then you have other funds that will just finance projects to reduce CO2 emissions. So you have a whole bunch of mechanisms. Now, federal subsidies or cantonal subsidies obviously are already decreasing. We have here a cost compensation, for instance. This is one of the systems that was put in place a few years ago, which is pretty much at its end now. It was for compensating for the difference in costs of producing electricity with renewable energies compared to electricity in the grid. So they would compensate for this financial, for the added costs, and this is disappearing already. So we see that this type of financial support is getting less and less. For photovoltaic panels, you still have a subsidy that is possible if you have less than 30 kilowatt installed on your house, but that's not very much in terms of size. For bigger projects, it becomes more and more difficult to obtain something that will really support you. Now, I suppose it will keep decreasing unless it is, I mean, we're going to pay more taxes, that's for sure, after 2020. The new law on CO2 is now on the development, and they foresee more taxes, so potentially more money to develop projects, new projects, but it will not necessarily be in the form of a standard subsidy that you would give to solar panels, for instance. If that answers the questions, I hope.
Certainly, I guess so. We are reaching now more or less the end, but if there are any other questions from the audience, would be pleased to take them on board. Waiting a few minutes, you have something, a few seconds coming up. No, so not everything was so clear that everybody now exactly knows what are the risks, especially what are the opportunities to go into a CO2 reduction programs, and that the tools are available from companies like Climate Services, which provide great help in dealing with all these complicated issues. So thanks to all for being there this morning. Hope you enjoyed. We have recorded this webinar and it will be made available on our website and on the website of Climate Services. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.